eventually we're on a pillow and we couldn't sit up because our head was so big.
I've even hit my head when I was a kid.
Yeah, I think we all did. And whether your parents admit it or not, they probably dropped you too, because we're so unpredictable.
Tony Berardo, Humanity and Hashtags podcast, as well as podcast coach, joins us tonight. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, where to begin? So I have a background in marketing and management. For about 15 plus years, I worked at some big companies like Coca-Cola and Monster Energy, where I grew to a leadership position in their marketing department. And then ever since then, kind of on the side, I started this content thing that I was doing on the weekends, where I would not only, create content for brands and just through my connections, occasionally just edit and kind of get into the content side of things and learning that aspect of social media and content, kind of the correlation between the two. And then I was like, I think I want to get into the podcast space. And before I got married, I ended up starting my own podcast, but it was just like me recording thoughts onto my phone and then kind of putting it out as a podcast. There was no editing, no video. It was just voice memo and then my old iPhone headset. And then eventually a lot of people, like a couple of my buddies, they're like, hey man, you wanna like have me on and we could talk about, what happened this weekend? And I'm like, yeah. So then it became this kind of casual thing where I would invite friends on. And then eventually about, now we're in year 4, I completely rebranded. Now I do video. I have a YouTube that's growing. I'm on all platforms, and the show's called Humanity and Hashtags, to where now I do this full time. So kind of through my journey, I've been able to not only help some of the brands that I work with create content, what's called UGC, which is kind of popular right now, user generated content. But also through that, I've been able to get picked up by a couple social media agencies where I manage social media accounts and I create other content that I'm not even involved in, but I could just kind of teach people how to, increase their quality of content as well as their workflow. And then just laterally that, again, I also do podcast coaching. And so I'm just kind of in the space, but a bulk of my time is spent my own personal podcast, which is where we just talk about wellness, productivity, and social media. And now I interview people from all over the globe. So it's been a cool journey, and it's been a short journey. So I'm looking forward to the next decade and kind of seeing where that puts me in this space.
Yeah, man. It's funny you mentioned I started with a couple of friends and just interviewing our friends. That's kind of where we're at. And so it's interesting to see 4 years after that. What does that look like? Because one of the things and then before we get into the conversation, one of the things that I was curious about, because I don't really know anybody that like has done this, right? Like this isn't exactly like a paved road in my community. So there wasn't like what does this look like after a year? What does this look like after 2-3 years? Is this something that is fulfilling? And so I think I'm very curious, and I will dig a little bit more about this as we get on, but I'd be curious to know as to how your perspective has changed on podcasting versus when you might have started, because certainly, and it's been for us a year, actually, we're just about to hit a year in podcasting. So I'd be curious to see how your perspective has changed on podcasting versus when you started, and where you thought you were going to be versus where you are now. But before we do that, I do want to know, if you don't mind, telling us what it was like as a young Tony. Like, what was it like growing up for you?
Man, I mean, there was so I'm only child, and I lived in not a very good side of town. If people are familiar with Orlando, I lived kind of like Lee Road area, if people know. Very low income. My dad worked 3 jobs. One of them was overnight at a grocery store. My mother either stayed at home to watch me, or she was a waitress at night. They would flip flop on shifts. And I I was surrounded by family and loved ones and grandparents, and man, it was all great when I was a kid, from what I remember. Um, and then, I think when I turned like 10, 11, 12, then your grandparents start dying off. Unfortunately, at least mine did, because they were a lot older. Some of them were to 80, 90, and one of them was close to 96, Nanny Rose. And I think after that happened, it was just kind of like this weird thing where now it was just me and my parents, and there was no like community or family, which is, of course, great. But I think we were so immersed in family and like Sunday dinners and all that. I think when that went away, I don't know if, there's any correlation to this. My parents would know better than I, but they ended up getting divorced after a while. At the age of 15, they separated, and, we tried to do that. And then eventually they got divorced when I was, I think, 15. So at that point, it was like, it wasn't really community or family. It was just like, I was the only child kind of stuck in that house. And then I ended up getting shared every other weekend if you're a kid of divorce. It's
Yeah.
not the best thing. You think because you're gonna have two Christmases and two birthdays that it's really cool. It's really not, especially at a young age like that. So I got kind of stuck in a bad crowd of folks. I ended up getting my first job, and then it was a good job. It was at Regal Cinema. I was getting paid a good amount of money. Got promoted to supervisor, but on the weekends, I party, I'd have a good time, and I'm not even 20 yet, right? And um, I I wasn't really popular in school until I joined the wrestling team, and that I think gave me a sense of community, maybe that I was longing for, and a bunch of like-minded delinquents on the wrestling team. So most of them were like kids of divorce, most of them are only childs, most of them are fucked up in some way. So I think I related to that a little bit, and then unfortunately, again, they're not the best examples of human beings. So by the time I was 18, I ended up moving out of my dad's place, getting my own place with not the best people. And then I wasted a lot of my 20s making some bad decisions.
I'm
However,
sorry. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I did want to ask you about the the wrestling crowd. I was in mixed martial arts for a few years, where I taught for a bit. I had that crowd of not necessarily just wrestlers, but like different forms. I'm curious, was there a drain on you, like pressure with weight cuts?
oh yeah, oh yeah, yeah. Wrestling in particular was, at least in our school. I don't know how other schools. I mean, but yeah, it was rough. I mean, especially because it's a lot of people don't know it's a very competitive sport internally, right? Because it's not like football to where if you have two running backs, it's exciting, right? It's like there's JV and varsity, and I was on varsity for the back half of my high school career, and you know, I mean, I was at 125, 130, but there was studs at that weight class, and how you had to do qualifying, right? Just like MMA, where you had to kind of qualify in your team, in your school. So there was me and three other guys. So four guys, we'd have like wrestle offs internally. And whoever won two out of three, depending on when it was, but two out of three, we would win, and that person would take that weight class. And then, of course, you would have like me as backup, quote unquote. But unless the dude gets injured, when you go to these tournaments, there's no backup. I mean, you're just sitting and not wrestling, which is whack because now you're doing all the brutal classes every single day. And we were part of the USA team too. So you get your USA
Wow.
card, and we did some freestyling after school. So it was like it was wrestling class, like at whatever time it was, 4 or 5 if I remember. And then after that it was like 6 to 7. We do freestyle, and we're like studs from all over the state would come and hang out in our class. So it was very competitive. So I ended up having to cut weight. I had to cut 15, 20 pounds just so I could start. And even
Wow.
then, it was rough because you're cutting weight. So that's not you. You're not, I was 130, really, but I was cutting down to 119 was my weight class.
Was there was there like a guidance to how to do it, or were you just like however you can? How were you doing it?
The worst ways possible. I mean, of course, coaches would help you and they say, hey, eat this and eat that. They would try to do what they can, but
Right.
ultimately, they just tell you, you need to be at this weight class. So just get there.
Wow.
And my dad was a wrestler too.
Mm.
So, he helped me out. But again, this was kind of like a weird time where it was like, it's not like I had the best relationship. Now my relationship with my parents is fantastic. But at that age, I was rebelling. I was kind of resentful. I didn't want to really hang. It's not like I wanted to hang out with them. And I
Sure.
think I kind of took some of their advice and just shrugged it on my shoulder because I had a chip there. So I just ran, but with garbage bags. And
Oh,
I went to saunas after I worked out.
yeah.
But I like to eat, at that age. I mean, you
Yeah.
just want to eat a bunch of junk food. And,
Yeah.
again, I'm hanging out with the wrong crowd and we're eating and we're staying up late. And, that's when I kind of got into my drug thing in high school. And it just wasn't, yeah, it wasn't the best. I mean, I was not taking it seriously, like I should have. And, it shows. I mean, because, when I was in high school, I think, so I started freshman year and I didn't get onto varsity until probably like mid sophomore, early junior. I was starting every meet and I was winning. Um, but, it's because I was messing around. And then once I really started taking it seriously, I started ramping up and started doing the right things. I won metros, I won districts, and then I lost in region. So I almost went to state in my senior
Wow.
year, and that was it. And that was kind of shitty because I mean, just like a lot of things, you could relate that analogy with. You could put in the time and the effort and the energy, but if you don't do it at the right times, it's pointless. You wasted time. So
Right.
like I spent 4 years wrestling, but I dicked around for 3 years. So my senior year, if I didn't mess around and I actually took it seriously, I probably could have went to regionals and states my junior year, really excelled in my senior year, and not saying that I would have got a full ride anywhere because I wasn't that good. I mean, there's guys that are a lot better than me that, didn't go anywhere with wrestling, but it's that feeling of accomplishment, right? Like you do these sports, especially with wrestling or MMA, you do these for two things, right? In my opinion, you do them for self-preservation. You want to either prove something to yourself, or maybe you want to release some anger or some aggression, or maybe you're depressed or whatever. MMA is great for that, especially when you're rolling around with somebody that's like-minded like that. And, it's just kind of a way to just have fun with someone that is motivated and kind of wants to get after it every day. And it's extremely healthy, obviously, for you. And then the other part is you want to like win something. You want to hit a goal. You want to impress a college. Maybe you want to just win states. I mean,
Mm.
so I think it's twofold to that. And the wrestling's are really cool, and MMA. It's really cool to do that because it's way different than like being part of a football team or anything. It's just you out there on the mat.
Yeah.
Um, but you don't realize that in order for you to get on the mat and be good at the mat, you need your teammates. So that's kind
Yeah.
of the behind the scene thing. Same thing with MMA. Like you need those people to spar with and roll around with, right?
Oh, absolutely. What do you think made you want to take it seriously though? Like what changed?
Failing,
Ah,
just constantly failing. Like my dad being supportive, but him also like looking at me at meets when I would get pinned and just seeing him and just being like, that right there. My dad's
uh,
Italian. So like he doesn't say anything. He just, it's all right, we'll get him next time. And that
yeah.
right there was like, eventually just enough of that just gets under your skin. Especially because I wanted to win. I wanted to be good. I wanted to impress people. And I was on the football team, but I was not good at football because I'm 5'5" and here I am 130 pounds. So I
Mm.
was a running back, but I was like third string. Barely sat on the bench. I mean, I would occasionally get up and just do some drives if we were winning. But yeah, so I was like, wrestling is something I can excel in. And I really enjoy the conditioning aspect of it too. So like eventually it got to me where I was going there every single day. I was wrestling with the team. We're sweating. It's disgusting. I mean, you know how the walls are.
Yeah.
The walls start dripping. It's gross.
Yeah.
Like it's exhausting. You get back, you don't even want to play video games because you're so exhausted. And then, by like year 3, I'm like, why did I do all that if I'm not going to win something? Like
Right.
I should have done something. And
Mm.
that's when it kind of like hit me where it's like, I have one more year to get my shit together. And I did. But I feel good about how I ended things. And I kind of take that same mentality into work life and my personal life now too. So it's taught me a lot. I mean, 4 years of that, I always tell people 4 years of that is better than like, in my opinion, any class I took in school.
Yeah. I'll tell you what, discipline is a big factor in that. Um, if nothing else, at least discipline was something I could say I got out of, which which the military helped me with to stick to, right? Because like I can't imagine, especially being a kid, right? Like having to deal with your emotions and having a chip on your shoulder and trying to prove something, but also wanting to hang with the crowd and wanting to like impress your friends and all that noise that comes with high school. Like there's that added level of challenge of becoming disciplined while you're also being rebellious, So
Totally.
I am curious, like with your dad, was there like you said you didn't have like the greatest relationship with him. What happened? Did that turn over while you were in high school, or was that something that changed later?
Probably way later. I mean,
Okay.
I always had a great, I mean, you can go back and look at videos because he used to videotape everything on the big old camcorder. I mean, we had like
Right.
a great relationship in the aspect of like father son stuff. Like
Okay.
that was great. Um, mentally, physically, we are on the same page. We were happy every time. But like the fact of like, I think when the divorce happened was
Uh,
when he didn't do anything wrong except for, not want to be with my mother anymore. That is what it is. It's not like
right.
he did it on purpose. It's just
Sure.
they both fell apart from each other. And that's just how things go now but I think then I don't have that critical thinking. I'm just like, you broke up with my mother. And then I looked at my mother like, you broke up with my father. So it was like, I don't like either of you.
Uh,
I still love you. There's a difference, right?
sure.
Like I love you. I respect you. I'm going to listen to everything you say. And, especially when I was under the same roof, like, I had dinner with him. We smiled, we laughed, we had a good time. But like internally, I think where that was the struggle. So I think that was getting pushed down internally. So I just rebelled, and it wasn't for lack of anything except for I think I was just missing that unity that you get from mom and dad. I mean, it's no different. I mean, if you look at like poor communities, specifically Hispanic, African American, all around the country, there's a reason why they a lot of them dip into crime and drugs, um, and that's because most of them are raised with single parents, mostly single mothers. In fact, I would probably say the vast majorities, get raised by a mother. When you don't have like not just a father, because I know plenty of great parents that are two dads or two moms, but when you have those two people, because they're not going to be the same, they're always usually yin and yang, right? Is like they always feed a good cop, bad cop, like they feed off each other. Like you have that
Right.
good. But when you're 15, 16 years old and you're trying to stay focused in school and you're trying to like be a part of a team and you want to do all these things, but then you go see your mother and your mother's like, how's your father? Oh, fuck him. He did this. He did. And then you go see your father and he's like, hey, how's your mother? Oh, fuck her. Fuck. It's like they're battling each other. And here I am stuck in the middle. And again, this is all things that I don't think they did on purpose or not.
Right.
They're not good parents. I just think it's natural. I mean, I've been a part of a breakup. You've been a part of a breakup yourself?
Yeah. Sure.
When you break up, it doesn't matter how good the person is. What do you tell your friends? That bitch, she fucking right. Like
Yeah. This is what happened to me. Right.
it's all her
Yeah.
fault. It wasn't
Yeah.
me.
Right.
And I just think that's a natural human reaction. Um, but I just did not have because I was so here's what I always tell people that are part of divorces. It's like there's nothing you could do, especially if you're that kid. Like if you're a kid out there listening right now, your parents, the only thing you could do, just like life, is the decisions you make are gonna decide your future. Whether you're 15 or whether you're 30, everything you make, if it's in your control, it's in your control. If it's not in your control, it's not in your control. Good example would be like my parents, they weren't going to get back together, out of my control. So I shouldn't have harped on that. I did harp on that. What was in my control? How I reacted to that. What was in my control was I could be a loving son to each of them. I could spend as much time with them as I possibly could. I could not get involved with their disputes. I could not play devil's advocate. There's a lot of things I could have done that was in my control, but I chose not to. I chose to rebel and I chose to make bad decisions and hang out with bad people. And that's the difference, right? Is like my life would have been a lot different if I had those critical thinking skills and said, this is what I do, cause and effect, right? If I do this, this is what's going to happen. But you're fucking 15, you're 16, you don't have that. And looking back on it, I know my dad had these conversations with me because he's a great father. And I know he was like, hey man, if you do this, this is what's going to happen. Just like we've all had those parents, right? Where they tell us to do one thing and we usually do the opposite. you know, that's how I reacted. I pretty much did the opposite of the advice. But looking back now, especially as a new father, I'm like, I know I'm going to tell my daughter things that she's just not going to listen to, and she's going to do things. But I think that's the beautiful thing with this life thing, right? It's like everybody's different. It's trial and error. You just got to go through the motions and figure it out. And hopefully you don't get hurt along the way. But if you do get hurt, you got to figure out a way to bounce back. And, I think those issues, quote unquote issues that I dealt with, I think they made me a lot stronger, in relationships and life. So I think it was, I wouldn't have it any other way, is what I'm saying. If I had,
Yeah.
a Loki fucking TVA time clock time machine to go back, I don't know if I would. I don't know if I would. I think I would
It,
just do it exactly the same way.
yeah. Also, I come from a divorced family. One of the things, one of the things that I would have liked to have heard, right? Because as a kid, you don't know this, and instinctually, there's science behind it too. That children will often take on, uh, they will think that things are their fault, like instinctively, like, oh, this is caused by me, and because to that kid, everything revolves around them because survival dictates that, right? Like where it's built into the human condition that like everything is about me because I need to survive, right? And so if my mom or my dad are fighting, it's it's not said, but it's felt like, what did I do something? And that's how I could tell you that I felt like a lot of times without knowing it. Because obviously, as a kid, you don't go, "Oh, I am taking this on to me," and this is, like that doesn't happen. But there's a feeling of rejection, right? Like that's how it felt for me, like a feeling of I'm not wanted, and so that's why my parents are not together. Is that they can't stand to be around each other. They can't stand to be around each other with me because of me. As illogical as that sounds, I realized that as a kid, I took that on a lot about like wanting, like it came out in my experience. It came out in me wanting to prove myself. Like, look, I can do this. Like, part of me becoming a Marine was, hey, like I want to prove something that I'm not this like useless thing that throw away garbage, right? Like that, as crazy as it sounds, at the time I thought, oh, well, I want to make something of myself. Yes, but its root is in the feeling of rejection of I am not good enough, I am not worthy. And
Mm-hmm.
not hearing from my parents, like, it's not about you. It has nothing to do with you.
Yeah.
I think that obviously nobody's perfect, but something that I'm going to take with me is if anything like that's to happen, it's the reminder of it is not about you. Like there's
Mm.
nothing wrong with you. Like you didn't do anything wrong. There's nothing you can like do to make that better. Like still love you. Like nothing changes. I'm here for you whenever. That's the thing that I felt missing, right?
Yeah.
So I'm curious to know for you, like you said, you ping ponged kind of back and forth, and there was like the feeling of resentment towards both of them at some point. Um, was what was the moment where it was like, was there a conversation that was had about this? Like, was there ever between your mom and that you had with your mom or your dad about this situation, or was it just kind of like we moved on?
Um, I mean, I think when so they got divorced, I think when I was 15 or 16.
Uh,
And I think the straw that broke the camel's back, if I had to say it, would probably be I went through again this rebellious phase, which I don't want to get too much into it, but I
okay.
was involved a lot with drugs, all types of drugs, and I was kind of doing my own thing, and my mother found out. My mother's obviously quote unquote cooler and the fact that she wouldn't have like ratted me out or anything. But my dad, if he found out first, which when he did find out kind of what I was doing and things I was up to, he put me up against um, kind of a brick wall, um, figuratively, uh, during a Thanksgiving holiday, and he's like, "I never want to see you again." And at the time, I was like, whatever, dude. Like I was living on my own anyway. So I left and I went to go stay with my buddy. I got a place. And then I didn't talk to him for a long time, maybe like 6 months. Uh, but then I think it was around my birthday, which is in May. He made a bunch of like CDs and DVDs. For people that don't know, DVDs was before streaming, and he made a
Yeah.
bunch of DVDs that were converted to V8 from VHS. Those camcorders I was telling you about.
Yeah.
And if people don't know VHS, that was before
Yeah.
DVD.
Yep. Yep. There, we do need to. Yeah, we do need to inform about those.
Google that if it
Yeah.
exists. But so he took all those VHS camcorder home movies and the trips that we did and all that shit when we were all together, my mother and him and all that. And it was some great times, some of the best times of my life. We went all over the country. It was fantastic. So we converted those to DVDs, dropped them off at me and my buddy's house, and just, left. Left me a message saying, "Hey man, these are outside." And I watched every single one of them and broke me down. It put me to tears, and I was like, what the hell am I doing? And so then I cleaned up my shit. I that at that point was like that was the moment where, and I don't know if he meant to do that, like for me to snap out of it like that, but it just made me realize that I'm wasting time not spending time with family and having these bad relationships. Whether I did something wrong, they did something wrong, it doesn't matter. Like there's no excuse for my behavior. So I need to clean my shit up and I need to earn their trust and love back.
Sure.
So I did. And now me and my father have like a way better relationship than we ever did. And we had, again, great relationship aside from those moments. So I think again, I go back to that made me stronger. That was the moment where I think we all became closer. My mother and father still don't hang out and talk. Now that I have a daughter, they, you know, we do things and they they suck it up and they
Civil,
power through.
hopefully. Yeah.
Yeah, but no arguments. No, I mean they're very cordial. Everything's fine. They just don't have a relationship. They don't text or
Sure.
call or right. So I think that was just again the turning point for me, and I opened up my own company at one point with a business partner of mine, and it was a marketing company where we worked with a lot of different companies to just kind of create. Uh, I would take their excess inventory, like theme park tickets or uh, seats at stadiums. I worked with a lot of sporting events down in Miami, like the Miami Marlins, and we would take those extra seats and we would kind of convert them into packages and we would sell those business to business. We do cold calling and um, then me and my partner kind of split up. I got my portion. He got his. I left Miami, went back up to Orlando to work at a corporate job at Coca-Cola. And yeah, the rest is history. So I think that kind of moment, that I was telling you about my dad kind of cleaned me up a little bit and got me focused on like I need to get out of my 20s and start focusing on life. Because at this point, shit, I think I might have been like 23, 24. I mean, I'm still pretty young,
Yeah.
but I wasted a lot of my time, right? So that's why I had my first business at 25. And then I had that for a couple years. And then, I'm 38, 39 next month now. So,
Wow.
but yeah, that was the moment. I think that was the moment. I think everyone has those moments, right? Where it's something impactful that hits you. And that's where it hit me, where I was like, I'm getting too old for this, and I need to focus on family and my career, and I need to get my shit together. I had a lot of fun, but I needed to clean it up. So
Speaking of your 20s, right? Like when you left high school, because like one of the things that I remember being in high school that was a lot of pressure and I still wasn't sure, like, everybody talks about careers, like what do you want to do? Like, where do you want to go? Like, what's your plan for the future? And I remember hearing my classmates and people talking about, oh, like I applied for this scholarship and I'm going to go to this college. And there's some people that only really cared about going to party schools. And I remember hearing those conversations a lot. And here I was like thinking like, well, what do I want to do? Like, where am I going to go? What was your thought process leaving high school? Did you already have something in mind? Because you said you opened a business, but did you have that going in mind when you left high school?
yeah, I don't think so. No, because again, when I left high school, I dropped out of college after a couple semesters. And that's, again, I was starting to rebel. Here I am, 18, 19 years old, dropped out of college. Parents fucking hated it, especially my dad because he paid for it. Um, but I was in business. It was business administration, just like, 40% of the population. But I really got a knack for business and I really enjoyed it. And my dad, and, he was an entrepreneur and still is. And I always had that entrepreneur mentality. I think wrestling kind of solidified that for me. Because again, you're on your own, the discipline that you learn, the responsibility, like all that stuff, even though I was kind of dipping my hands into a lot of stupid stuff, the one thing that I knew for sure was like, I'm gonna own my own business one day. But it took me a few more years. So I kind of had those party years where I had fun. I was a personal trainer during this time. So once I started really making money and having good clientele, I was like, I don't need school. I'm fine. I'm learning a lot here. I was the youngest guy there at LA Fitness, and I had a lot of mentors that were in their 30s that would just teach me the ropes of business and spreadsheets and bouncing checkbooks and like all these behind the scenes POS systems and like cold calling, like all this stuff. And then I took that after a couple of years, applied that to eventually open up my own business. And I was not ready to open up I was way too young. It failed miserably. I mean, I made money, but that's why I had to get out. I was like, I'm not ready. It's, at 24 years old, it was idiotic. But yeah, but that was the thing where I knew still to the day, now I own my own business and I know what I'm doing now. But all those trials and all those, the stupid things that I did, especially when it comes to business, you learn from and you just don't do it again and you just get better at it. And that's why I did a video the other day. And I had a lot of people that said, hey man, I needed to hear this because I kind of put out a public service announcement. I was like, if you're 30, like you're not supposed to have it figured out. There's so much pressure, especially, when I was a kid and when you were a kid, so much pressure about like get married, have kids, get a house, pay for a mortgage, like
Timelines.
yeah, stable job, 401k. Like, dude, I was part of some multi-billion dollar companies that ended up going bankrupt and that 401k did jack shit. Like the world's different now than it was in the 60s. That's just a
Yeah.
fact. And I'm not saying not to work at a corporate job, do whatever you want. And I don't think everyone should own their own company. I'm just saying, just like a business, there's nothing guaranteed. You know, you working at a corporate job, ain't nothing guaranteed, right? Like nothing's guaranteed. And you could be the best. It doesn't matter. So I think having a timeline and putting a timeline on something where you need to be at this corporate job and you need to have 401k, you put that timeline and that pressure on you, it's going to fail miserably for you. You just cannot have any timelines because things change constantly. I mean, there's companies now that are hiring just for TikTok creators. And they
Yeah.
did that at the peak of the pandemic, right? In 2020 and 2021. Well, now
Yeah.
TikTok might get banned. Most likely it's going to get passed. And in 6 months, there's not going to be TikTok anymore in the US. So now those people are going to lose their jobs unless they transition to Instagram or social media. But most companies have a specific TikTok creator. So now you don't have a job. So what you thought was secure and was great, it's not going to be secure. So things are always changing. So you cannot be so set on something. And that's one thing I learned as a business owner. You gotta innovate and you gotta go with the flow. You gotta hit the highs where they're at, and during the lows, you gotta learn from them and scale back and keep your break even low and save money. And you just gotta work through it. So, and a lot of that comes from the wrestling discipline as well.
That's huge. I think I'm glad that you say that because it's still a cultural thing about you gotta by the time you're 30, you gotta have put together. You gotta have family. You gotta be at a 5-figure job, right? Like you gotta have a house, right? Maybe that was the case in the 60s, like you said, right? Like maybe you could do that then, but it's not like that anymore. And another thing too is with businesses is there's such a large variety now of businesses. Like where do you even begin, right? Like it's so many types of businesses you could get into, and it's not the availability of information is so much more now that like by the time you think of doing something, somebody's already done it. Somebody's already working on it. Somebody's actually really successful at it and is dominating the market, right? So there's so many factors, but I am curious though, because you had your own business, right? And you learned from trial and error. What was the biggest lesson you learned from that first business that didn't go well?
Break even low. Break even low. Are you familiar with the term break even?
No.
So break even essentially is the amount of money that you need to break even in your business. So you need to know what that money is. Give you an example real quick. So like let's say your mortgage is $2,000 a month, your car payment's 500, that's 2,500, right? Your cell phone is 100, 2,600. And maybe you have some other utilities that total $400, right? Electric, other stuff. So now you're at $3,000 a month. So that's your break even. Like if you put it in personal terms, not business
Right.
terms. But if you just being a human being, you have to pay $3,000 a month to hit your break even. So that means that everything above that is profit. But you got to hit that break even every month because you got to pay your bills, right? Usually with a business, it's that because you still have like rent to pay, electric, phone, all that. But on top of that, you got payroll and you got employee outings and you got, fucking office supplies and all this shit
Sure.
that, it adds up. So what I was doing was I was hitting my break even, fine. But then all the profit I'd have, I'd be like, oh, I'll get a new phone. Oh,
Mm.
I'll get a new TV. Oh,
Mm-hmm.
I'll do this. I'll do that. And you're spending money left and right. Little do you know that in most businesses, it's all up and down.
Yep.
A lot of highs, a lot of lows, unpredictability. So when you are high, that's what I was saying earlier, when you're high and you're making tons of dough, that's when you stack, you save, you make money. And the one thing I learned now is I don't spend anything until I can hit my break even for a year. So that means I'm not spending any incremental money. I'm not doing any trips. I'm not buying new phones or new camera gear, nothing until I can quote unquote hit my break even for a year. Like that stacks. So that way my bills are paid for a year, maybe 6 months, depending on, now we have a kid, I might readjust, but every 6 months. So, okay, I could pay my bills for 6 months. Beautiful. Now I could maybe spend a few $1,000s here and there. Now we can go on a trip. I was not doing that before. Anytime I had extra money in the bank, I would just buy it because I'm like, oh, next month I'll make the same amount. No, not true. And then eventually I lost a couple months in a row and now I'm dipping into my savings to pay bills. And then that becomes stressful, right? And, if you own a business, a lot of that stuff is based off of, you know, leadership. So if you're kind of down and depressed and you're losing money, you're not making money, you can't cut yourself a paycheck, now you become stressed out. That goes to your employees and your friends and your family and your spouse. My relationship got ruined because of it. Like,
Mm.
it's a down spiral. And I hate to say this because money's not everything,
Right.
but if you do not pay the bills, a lot happens negatively. So that's why hitting a break even is so important is just paying the bills might be good enough. If you got no money in the bank, that's okay. Don't stress out. As long as you can pay the bills, put a roof over your head, that's fine. That's why we have credit cards. That's other people's money. I mean, take their money, pay your credit cards on time. That way you can avoid interest, but that's borrowed money. So, our government and here in the US, they're borrowing money all the time, trillions, in fact. So you could borrow a few thousand from a credit card. So, that's how my relationship with money has changed drastically. I don't care about money anymore. I don't care about the things anymore. But back then in my 20s, that's all I cared about was buying the new thing so that way I can look cool and get laid. I mean, that was the thing. So
Yeah.
that changed.
Uh, Speaking of relationships, how did you? What was your view on relationships? Let's say starting fresh, right? Because one of the things that I learned, like one of the biggest things, and I would say it was both a good and bad. It was both bittersweet to learn that relationships, like love, is not what I thought it was, because all I knew about love was that of what I saw with my parents, right? Of like they're always around each other and like that's your only friend and like the only person that you talk to all the time, and there's this cage around it, and so no one can like penetrate this cage, and so you guys are supposed to like, you know, hash it out together, and it's like there's a community that's supposed to be behind that. That was like the biggest lesson for me going into relationships, of thinking that like I'm supposed to hold on to this thing as tightly as possible and never let it go, because that's what love is. And boy, was I wrong. So what do you think the biggest lesson was for you from when you started dating to, like, for example, now?
Um, the biggest lesson. I think I ruined a lot of relationships because I didn't start that relationship from scratch. Like there was always resentment from a previous relationship,
Ah,
right?
I get what you're saying.
So like, I don't even know when I had my first girlfriend. I want to say I was like 17, maybe 18. And then that didn't work out, obviously. I'm not with her.
Mhm.
But uh and then when I was like 19, I got another one. And the things that I hated about my previous ex, I kind of like was looking out for in my new girlfriend. So even though she didn't have those characteristics, but it was just like I was holding these grudges. And again, that could maybe it was stems from the divorce. I don't know. But I was holding these grudges every single relationship. So by the time I got to like the sixth girlfriend, it was like this bitch didn't have a chance. Like it was
Mhm.
she had everything was wrong with her before I even met her. She didn't know. She did nothing wrong. But so I think I lost a lot of relationships. I don't know where my life would be if I felt differently. I do know that I'm so happy now, and it all worked out perfectly as I planned,
Yeah.
because all things work out perfectly.
Yeah.
No, but I think it worked out well because me and my wife, we met almost 8 years ago, and we didn't really plan on it. But we
Mhm.
both came out of shitty relationships. We weren't really looking for it. We had a mutual friend kind of force us to accidentally get together one night with a group of people, and then sparks flew, and rest is history. But I think that's the difference, is like I wasn't looking for it, so it found me. And same thing with her. It was like a perfect timing. And funny story, true story, where we met with these group of friends. We ended up doing like bars and restaurants and just kind of hanging out, doing some bar hopping. And then we ended the night at an escape room. So I was stuck there with my now wife, Brenda, and then like four or five other people that were hammered. We weren't, because we were just talking, having a good time, but everyone else was hammered. So they were all passed out on the ground in this escape room. And it's me and my now wife figuring this thing out, figuring out how to get the escape. We ended up not really focusing too much on the game because we were having so much fun with each other.
Mhm.
So like those, you only get an hour to escape. We were barely doing anything. We were just having fun. We were laughing. We were making fun of the people that were passed on the ground. And then I got her number. And then the next day we hung out on an official date, just the two of us. And we literally have not been away from each other for more than a day since then. So, and then now we have a beautiful 8 month old daughter
Yeah.
together. So it's I think the difference is I wasn't looking for it, man, and I didn't care if I found it or not, and I didn't care what she did, and I just kind of let things flow where they flow, and you can never tell the future. I mean, we always joke about it all the time where we're never gonna there's no way we're gonna get divorced. Like, how could even people think that? But I get it, especially when you have kids. I get it. Like I was even I was telling my dad this the other day. I was like, man, having a kid's fun, but spouses. Like I looked at him, I was like, I get it, dude. I get why you divorced my mother. Like it's not when you have a kid, there is stress, right? And there's financial stress and mental stress, and it's a lot. It's a lot of work. And you got to be mentally strong and able, and you got to be able to read each other. And I think that's a lot of what marriage is not more so like meeting in the middle. I think that was my assumption was like, oh, if she wants Thai food and I want Italian, we do Chinese. Like that's not what marriage is.
Mm.
Marriage is you do make sacrifices, sure, but you're not asking each other to sacrifice what they like, because then there becomes a resentment, right? So like if I really like video games and she really likes Dancing with the Stars, sometimes I'll watch Dancing with the Stars with her. Sometimes she'll be on her phone while I play video games. But sometimes we just go in our own fucking rooms and do our own thing. That's okay
Yeah.
too. So it's like you can't really tell someone not to watch Dancing with the Stars because you don't like it. You just got to give them their space and let them fucking do it. Because then if you don't do that, and if you tell them they can't watch Dancing with the Stars or Love is Blind, whatever you're into, and you tell them you can't do it, then eventually 6 years from now, 10 years from now, 5 months from now, they're going to resent you. And that's how divorces happen. So, amongst other things. And I think that's what we learned is like we know when we're getting triggered and we know when we're pissing each other off. So we
Right.
just kind of we separate, and that comes with time, I think. But that's the one thing I learned from relationships is you can't carry a grudge, from other ones.
Yeah, that's a big one. Thank you for
Yeah.
that. How does it? How do you think having a child changed the dynamic? If it did, do you think it changed it at all?
I think it made it more tense at times. Yeah, if I'm being honest. I mean, it's definitely not easier. No, way more difficult. But it's like a new set of challenges. It's you learn. It's no different than you're dating somebody, right? They got their own apartment, you got your own apartment, and you meet up and it's romantic and ooh, can I sleep over? Ooh, let me keep my toothbrush here. Woohoo.
Right.
But
Right.
you're not living with it. Then you move in together and then you realize like, oh, fucking he's a snorer and he, sleeps with his socks on and he has sex with a t-shirt on. Like then there's all these little things that kind of piss you off, but then
Yeah.
you learn to get over it. And it's like, yeah, it's all good. So I think that's where we were in the beginning to where it's like these little challenges. Cause I don't know if do you have any kids? I forget. I'm
No.
sorry.
No.
Okay, good. Take your time. But like when you have a kid, the doctors and nurses help you and then you leave and they let you take a child and there's no like manual.
Right.
There's like, all right, thanks. Like
See ya.
there's no other interaction. They want you to put the baby in the car seat because they want to make sure you're capable. And then that's it. That's all they do. And then it's just up to you to raise a human being. It's fascinating because they're so up your ass, or in my wife's case, up their upper vagina, the entire time. And then the second the baby comes out, you walk downstairs. We stayed whole night, but you walk
Yeah.
downstairs. You put the baby in the car seat. Okay, see ya. Bye. There's like 5 nurses. Bye. Good luck.
Yeah.
And then we're driving and we're looking at each other like, what the fuck are we doing? So that's the new challenge, right? Because they don't tell you, okay, night 1 is going to be the worst night of your life because the baby's going to cry every 20 seconds. And,
Yeah.
and now we got like super comfortable with everything. And now she's 8 months and now she's teething. So now
Oh.
it's like nights are even brutal. So, but it was great for like a month. It was perfect. It was like bliss. It was like, this is why we had a kid. It's rainbows and butterflies. And then, now here we are at 8 months and it's like, shit. So, and I got a feeling it's going to be like this until she's 18. So in 18 more years, we'll be free again. But it's cool, man. It's like our own little, you know, it's like our own little adventures. Like it keeps things spicy and fun. And now you get to do things. And the one thing I love that it changed me most, I think, than anything, is just the fact of like watching her, like she's growing up because of you.
Yeah.
Is the easiest way to put it.
A byproduct of you.
Yeah, dude. Like without you and your spouse, this human being wouldn't be able to do the things she does. Like now she's eating with a spoon on her own. She's sitting up completely now. Like just a month ago, we had to like prop pillows around her so she wouldn't fall. But now
Right.
she's sitting up and she's smiling and she's laughing and she's saying like words like manama, mana.
Right.
Like she's gonna say your name any day now. Like
Yeah.
and we're doing it and we do that every day and we work on it every day to get her to be a human being in society. And that is such a difficult thing to do. It's so much responsibility and so much money. But man, you're like, because it's just weird to think about. Like, can I go down a rabbit hole with you real quick? Do we have
Please.
time? It's just, I think about this all the time because everybody was this thing at one moment, right? Like you and I eventually were on a pillow and we couldn't sit up because our head was so big.
I've even hit my head when I was a kid.
Yeah, I think we all did. And whether your parents admit it or not, they probably dropped you too, because we're so unpredictable and we're so. But like we all came out of a woman, every single one of us. That's crazy. We all were anywhere between 4 to 10 pounds at one point, and now we're 150, 200, 300. Some people 400 something pounds. So we went from nothing to this, what we are now, and we're talking on a podcast
Yeah.
uh, via Wi-Fi. Like I think about that all the time. Where we all started from nothing, and we're going to go out with nothing. But the moments that I'm experiencing right now with my daughter are so crucial because I'm teaching her what all this is. Like you and I don't go through life getting taught things typically. Like we're at the point now where it's like, gotta figure it out.
Yeah.
So like this is such a cool time because now I'm the teacher and I'm showing not her like how to spell because I'm doing that too, but like how to chew food, how
Right.
to grab something, how to stand up. Like there's so many things that you don't even remember that you did, but you did it. Like you learn these things too. And I think there's a lot of vulnerability there and it's humbling in a lot of aspects. And it's just super fascinating. Every time I see her, I look at her and I just like, I can't believe like I was this small. And then my parents did something that turned me into this. And now I'm going to have the opportunity to turn something into a grown adult woman that's going to
Yeah.
function in society and have a job and, you know, have friends and talk to people. And it's just, I don't know. It's to me, it's got to be the greatest gift of the world. It's just amazing. It really is.
Did it did it change your view on your parents at all?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
What do you think if you could just spit some off
Yeah.
things that have changed of your viewpoint?
Um, that I shouldn't have, lack of a better word, I shouldn't have had resentment to them because it is hard to have a kid. Um, Even though I don't remember what it was like being a kid, but like that young. But I would imagine my entire life it was a challenge because you're always trying to do things to make them happy. And then as a kid, I didn't appreciate it at the moment, because again, as a kid, you take it for granted. So that was one thing is like just not being able to. I just wish I appreciated my childhood more. I did not. And then also too, like just the fact of thinking so far ahead. They took the time and the energy to lay out plans and things for me to be successful. I ignored those things. So like it made me kind of self-aware of what I need to do with my child. And I learned a lot of lessons on that aspect where I need to teach her how to do things as good as I can. Again, I know she's not going to listen, but that was just a couple things where it just made me appreciate them way more. And it's just humbling. It's even though unfortunately they're not in her life as much as I want, only because there's just not enough time. Like when you have a kid, you just don't have time. And like
Right.
we barely have time to hang out with our own daughter because we both work from home and she's napping so much and she's eating. There's just a lot of work. So I'm excited when she gets a little bit older, where we'll be able to have like Sunday dinners, just like I did, when I was a kid, and just kind of create that community again. And I think that's going to be a cool thing to do to kind of bridge that gap that maybe has been missing over the decades.
Yeah. Those are some good lessons. Getting to where you're at now, right? Like, how did you? We talked a little bit before we got on about this following the pandemic, as I saw a lot of you had a huge effect on me. I'll tell you that I started a relationship in the middle of a pandemic. So yeah, that was rough, and so there were a lot of things that were changing, and so what for you was like a aha moment or like I guess come to Jesus moment of like, hey, maybe this is the next route for me.
I just look at life differently now. I had what we talked about is I was diagnosed having a tumor in my lung during the pandemic, a little bit after, and that tumor, thank goodness, is not cancerous, benign, but they had to remove it, so I had to go into surgery. It was very invasive, aggressive. They had to remove about a third of my right lung, and you take breathing for for granted when that happens, because I had this massive tube in my lung, and every time I would breathe, the tube would just kind of rub up against my
Oh,
lung. Yeah,
mm,
not cool, man. And they could dope you with as much meds as you want, but
mm,
it doesn't matter. Like, those morphine drips don't do shit with that amount of pain. So that was
yeah.
tough, but it was more of a challenge because I think I'm so healthy. I won't get into the pandemic and vaccine theory
Mm,
that I think, but there's a lot of studies saying that the vaccine could be causing some respiratory issues like tumors and
mm,
growths and things. So I wouldn't have got the vaccine if it wasn't for the company I worked for. Again, fuck them. But they forced me to get it. So, but I think that there was a little bit of anger there when I was dealing with all this because it was so out of my control. We talked about that earlier.
yeah.
But then as I'm in the hospital, my wife couldn't visit me because of the whole pandemic bullshit where you can't visit each other in the hospitals. So I'm like by myself. I'm depressed. I'm hitting that morphine button every 10 minutes like I'm supposed to. And meanwhile, my wife's just on her own. She's worried. And then her father wasn't doing too good for years. During that time, right before I got discharged after a couple weeks, turns out he passed away
Mm,
while I was in the hospital. And she, again, obviously couldn't come and see me. So my dad picked me up, brought me to back to my house. And then I couldn't even hug my wife, you know, because of I was still stitched up and stuff. So I couldn't even console her, and she's trying to grieve, but she's also like so happy that I'm alive. So there's this like weird time where she was really tested, and she pulled through and did a beautiful job of it. But when I saw her, I knew that she was struggling, right? And so there was kind of that weird time where I couldn't even sleep in the same bed because we have a dog. She had to sleep with the dog in the bed, and I couldn't even roll over. I had to surround myself with pillows and sit like this so that way I couldn't lay down because the stitches went to my back too. So it was like the second I got home, I couldn't even like be intimate with my wife during this time
mm,
and grieve with her. And it was just a shitty time. I couldn't even go to the funeral because of my surgery. I couldn't even move. So it was like,
wow.
there's all that stuff. Meanwhile, I'm with this other company, and a couple days later, they laid me off because they laid off the whole company because the company went bankrupt. And I was there for almost a couple years, making really good money, had 401k benefits, all the bullshit we talked about. And that's when it really hit me. That's when life was like, okay, bro, like you need to figure
Yeah.
some shit out because I'm gonna throw you some curveballs, and
Right.
I'm gonna knock you down as low as you can go. And that's when I looked at him and was like, I think I'm gonna go all in this business thing, right? Because like we talked about earlier, where I was kind of doing stuff on the side, right? Like on weekends, I'd make content and do the podcast and all
Sure.
that. And I was like, I'm just gonna fucking call. Who cares? What do I got to? What am I gonna get fired? I mean, what?
Right.
I already
Right.
got fired. I was like, fuck it, I'm just gonna do it. And now I look at things differently. Like now, when people are like, hey man, do you want to go and hang out and do this, go to this bar, do that? Like, no, I'm gonna hang out with my wife. I'm gonna hang out with my daughter because I went through something that I don't think anybody should go through. And same thing with my wife. And I could not imagine missing another moment. I really couldn't. And I was this close, I thought, to having to go through chemo and doing all that stuff. And
Mm,
yeah, it's just not. Yeah, nothing to me is worth it than these four walls. So I just look at things way differently now. Like I don't care about the new iPhone. I don't care about fucking a new car. It's just these four walls, man. Like I don't need six figures. I've turned down a lot of good jobs that I could easily do, but that would make me leaving these four walls. No way.
mm.
I'm good. So that was the moment for me.
And once you did get started, what were the challenges that you had to face? Because I'll tell you from my experience, from the concept of just this, like talking about mental health, this is still taboo. It's crazy to me
For sure.
that talking about like your family background, like talking about like what you experienced, like for me, talking about the divorce and like where we all landed, my siblings, and what we had to face. Like I've talked to my older brother about being on here, and he's like,
You're not doing it. Yeah.
I've asked family members, right? So the challenge for me starting out was who who wants to talk about that, right?
Sure.
Like
Yeah.
who wants to sit down and open up about some of the hardest things they've gone through, and some of the things that maybe family members don't want them to talk about because they might feel ashamed, you
Right.
know, because there's a shame factor associated still with talking about trauma.
Sure.
And so that was the challenge for me, is getting people who were willing to talk about this without, be not without, but along with, like, what's the word for it? Despite the fear of my family might see this and they might not be happy that I'm saying this because this was my experience,
Mhm.
and still have that ability, the courage to come out and say, this is what I went through and this is my story and this is my truth.
Yeah.
So for you, what was the what were the challenges you had to go through when you started this? Because it's a pretty, I would say it's a pretty similar field of wellness and growth and all that for your podcast.
Yeah, 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 yeah. No, I think it started as a journal for me.
Mm.
And you're right. I mean, people don't want to talk about a lot of different topics. And what I found with the podcast is when you get people on the microphone like this, when you're disconnected from devices and you don't have a TV in the background. Like I've had my wife on a bunch and she talks to me, you know, differently on this podcast in a true authentic way
Yeah.
than if we were to be at home, because at home we never get an hour and a half of real talking, right? It's
Mm.
always like,
Mm-hmm.
let's watch an episode, and then in between commercials we're both on our phone. Like it's just this weird dynamic so I think there's something intimate and very important, I think, uh, for someone to experience is this art form of just talking to people. And it's different than journaling, because a journal you're going to write down and put it underneath your mattress and no one's going to read it except you, most likely. But the podcast is not that you need validation from people, but I think it is important to be the fly on the wall and to have conversations and allow people to listen to those conversations, because there might be one person out there that gets value from it. And there might be one person out there that's dealing with PTSD, or maybe one person that has mental health issues, or maybe one person like me that, had back to back fucking curveballs, and it was hard to get up in the morning and go to work. And then, of course, I couldn't work out. And that was like such a big part of my life. And I couldn't do that for a long time. And I still struggle with it. But I learned through this medium of talking to people that motivate me and get me excited. Um, and it allowed me kind of the opportunity to, I think, get stronger for it. So I think it's extremely impactful. And it doesn't necessarily have to be podcasting. Maybe it's something else. Maybe it's you like to draw, or you like to do uh, pot making. You're like clay pots. You like to do that. Like whatever you're into. I think it's important to do that and to go all in on that, because there's so much creativity that comes oozing out of you, and I think it gives you a little burst of life, right? Like that's one thing I realized when I was kind of down in the dumps is not that I thought about suicide or anything, but I get it. I get why people do. Um, I didn't take any pain meds. They prescribed me Oxy, no surprise,
Mm.
fuckers. And I decided not to take them, and it was the worst pain of my life. So I've never felt worse pain than that. And there was moments where, you know, I looked around and I was like, I get it. I get why people do it. Like it
Yeah.
would be better to end this bullshit. And the only thing that kept me going was my wife, like I need to be strong for her, just like she's strong for me. And she, again, she lost her dad and she was being strong for me. So it was like, what a pussy am I? It doesn't matter if I had a leg amputated. Fuck this. I'm not gonna, that's my wife. Like that's gonna be the future mother of my child. Get the fuck up, Tony.
Yeah.
And that was it. And not everyone will have that attitude, because it's not an attitude that everyone gets. I think you
Sure.
you are kind of like forced into that. And again, we go back to MMA and wrestling. Like these type of things, I think, kind of came out of me a little bit, and they've been dormant for decades, but they came out at the right time to where it's like, it's fucking weigh-ins. And you're right, like it's the day before. You got to power through. You can't let your team down. You got to make it for these weigh-ins. The districts rely on us. Like all these things, I think, kind of came bubbling out of me. So I think it's important that you find some type of medium. For me, it was podcasting, luckily, and through time, I invested in like 240 episodes, I think, in. Um, but through time, I started, like I said, on my phone, and now I'm I spent $1,000 on equipment, and I've only done that because I know for sure if I spend the money on it, that it's going to get good quality. People are going to like it, but more importantly, I'm going to enjoy doing it. Right? Like
Sure.
I've committed my life to content and to equipment and to learning everything there's to know about making high quality content. And then that's why I teach people how to start their own podcast and how to kind of grow in a very, very easy and affordable way because I know how important this. I really believe in the podcasting platform. It's a lot of people think it's a joke and for comedians and stuff, and there's a little bit of that too. But I think more importantly, it's helped people a lot escape right from something and kind of pour your heart and soul into it. And I think it's a beautiful thing. So if people don't like that, fuck them.
I think at least it's a bridge.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
I think at least it's a bridge to more important conversations or more important stages in life. I think
Sure.
it's that little bridge across the river to the next stage in my eyes.
Not like
This
the ones
leads
in Baltimore, but other ones.
Okay, right, nicer bridges.
Right.
That this actually leads perfectly to what we were talking about very early on. What has changed in your viewpoint on what you thought podcasts were versus what you see it as now? For example, for me, podcasting at first I thought was when I first started seeing them, I was one of those people that was like, it's just a lot of people just venting, like it's like an open diary. And I think it's not the worst description, but it's not the full picture either, right? Sitting here now and like seeing where because conversations can go in many different directions when you're sitting with somebody, but when there's the vulnerability aspect, which is what I'm focusing on, is right, like the being vulnerable part. That has changed my viewpoint of how impactful podcasting can be. So what has changed for you, do you think, or has it been relatively the same?
No, it's a good question. I mean, I think it evolved. I think it got to the point to where I only focus on the conversations. I don't focus on topics um, or like an agenda, meaning like, the goal of this is to unleash the creativity of this person. Like I want to learn about all their thoughts and dreams. Like I just kind of like, for whatever reason, I want to talk to somebody, just like we're having this conversation now.
Sure.
And like you said, where it goes is where it goes. And I don't care if it's, in my opinion anyway, I don't care if the listener gets something from it. I know that's kind of weird to say because you need listeners and you need to grow. But I never started this podcast to gain listeners. I started this podcast as an outlet. So I'm going to talk about whatever I want to talk about, and I want to interview whoever I'm going to interview, and I just want to have good conversations, and hopefully people like it. And if they don't like it, maybe they go to another episode. But I never want to that's why I don't script anything. I just kind of go with the flow. Some podcasts are 10 minutes, some are 2 hours. And it's one of those things where I think it's one of the only places that you can literally have a conversation with somebody. Like if you really think about it.
Yeah.
I mean, you go to a bar with a buddy, put your phone away. Let's see the conversation you're going to have. Oh, you won't because there's going to be a hot girl at the other end of the bar. Mm-hmm. Oh, the waitress is going to come up and ask you what you want to drink. And then she's going to say beer. And then you're going to talk about that one time you guys went to a brewery. Like there's no conversation. It's only what's happening around you. Right. And when you're in these rooms and you have the headsets on and you're listening to some high quality sound with each other, nothing's interrupting us. There's something meaningful in that. And I think different conversations come up that way. And if you think about it, we never had conversations like that recently, right? Like back in the day before cell phones, we always used to have these conversations. I mean, I remember even me and my buddies when I was 15, 16 years old, we'd sit outside and we'd just sit on the grass and we'd just fucking talk. We'd shoot the shit, talk about our day. talk
Mm,
shit about the people we saw, talk about like the girls we liked. Like we
yeah.
just talk, hang out. Now those are podcasts, right? Like now those are what Barstool Sports does. I mean, it's like,
That's a good way to look at that. Yeah, I'd never thought about it like that.
but that's what we did, right? But now we're so consumed with these devices that we just kind of live vicariously through other people. And I think this is the only form left that allows you to kind of live with the person right now in the
Mm,
moment, unscripted, unedited, most likely. And yeah, I think it's great, man. So that my just the appreciation, just like relationships, looking back now as a father, my appreciation for what my parents dealt with, now I kind of like appreciate conversation way more.
yeah. Yeah.
And I respect it. So right now, what's even great is like when I do go to bars, going back to that analogy with buddies, my conversation is different,
Mm,
right? Like if someone comes up and a girl's like, hey, what do you guys want to order? I'd be like, Jessica, one more minute. One minute. What were you saying? Go ahead. Like
mm,
the conversation's the most important thing. I don't care where we are, because that you lose that like that gusto in a conversation when you get interrupted. So like I always try whether I'm out and about with friends or a group of people, like, I want the conversation to flow and I want it to be authentic and unique and long. I want it to be really long because I just love long conversations. I think it's beautiful. So
yeah. To bounce to piggyback off of that, I do think that here's a good comparison, right? Because as soon as you talked about with your friends, I remember in middle school there was a lot of that. I think in high school is really when it started to die down for me, because when I was in high school, that's when like smartphones were kind of taking over. So that would make a lot of sense. So in middle school, there was a lot of that of like talking about girls you like and like
sure.
kid problems that were like the whole world at the time. It's
Yeah.
like, yeah, like how am I going to get this girl to talk to me? Blah blah blah. Like it's like the end of the world, right? Like trying to figure that out. But I also noticed it for me going back into like the military was there was a lot of those conversations, and I thought that was just kind of like a military community thing until I started seeing like podcasts come up, and it's like, oh, it just evolved, like because it kind of had to because of all the media we're exposed to now and having the phones in your face. So in the Marine Corps, there was a lot of that of like us just because we weren't allowed, we didn't have our phones out, right? Like we couldn't have our phones out. So there was a lot of that of just like literally talking about the universe, right? Like there was conversations where we would like talk about, the multiverse and like, is there different timelines of what's happening in this conversation right now with like, things that you would probably talk about in high school and stuff, like where people say like, oh yeah, like this is like high conversations, like this is what you would talk about when you're high, but that's what we would talk about, right? Because this was like our time away. I was in the reserves, so I had my regular civilian life, and then once a month I'd see these guys, and so like we would all kind of just word vomit, like we would just sit and like talk about life and all that stuff that doesn't happen. So it's so true. Like I just wanted to reiterate that connection there of that makes a lot of sense now.
Yeah, dude, that's great. And you don't think about it, right? Because you take it for granted. But yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah, and so I do want to. We're running a little bit low on time, so I did want to kind of close this out with what is it that you have going on right now? If you'd like to share anything with the people watching, where we can follow you.
Yeah, check me out at the Berardo, TheBerardo. You could also check out everything I'm doing on my website, theberardo.com, where you'll find like, podcast coaching services and content creation stuff. And then, of course, my podcast, Humanity and Hashtags. And that's what I'm focusing a lot of time on. I put out an episode a week. I interview people from all over the world in different aspects of the wellness, productivity, and social media space. So it's just been fun to connect with different people. And we sometimes we dip into politics. Sometimes, we do other things. Like I had this really cool episode series where it's called 10 Full Episodes now, where I interview my buddy that's from Italy. He's from Rome, heavy Italian accent, but he has no idea what a conspiracy theory is. Like they don't understand that over there. So when you say like flat Earth, he doesn't know what you mean. So we, so every episode we break down different conspiracy theories, and I tell
Uh,
him the day before, "Hey man, you need to look up the ice wall in Antarctica." And so he'll look up that conspiracy there, and in the next episode we'll talk about it. And just his reaction of like the fact that we even think about this stuff is it's just funny. So those are only like 10 minutes long, but I'm doing a lot of those. Those are like once a month. But yeah, just kind of experimenting with the whole podcasting thing, man, and just doing different things and coaching people how to start their podcast affordably because I just love it so much. And I love having good conversation with people like yourself, man. I mean, we reached out on social media and it's just cool, man. I interview probably 10 people a month and I've never met them before in person. And I've only met them on social media. And a lot of people say that social media is so bad for us. And I'm just like, not for me, dude. Like I've met some really dope people on here and I think without the podcast, I'd have different feelings probably. But, you know, I don't know, my phone is just full of like people like yourself that are just really cool and easy to talk to. So I feel blessed, man, and excited. So hopefully people enjoy my podcast and share on the excitement.
I appreciate that. I have two final questions to end on for you.
Yeah.
Have you discovered purpose? And if so, what is it? And if not, what do you think it might be?
Good question. I'll try to make this one short. Um, I think a purpose is, and I think it was Shia LaBeouf that maybe said this. I want to give him credit, but I think purpose is finding what you love to do. Um, but your purpose is not that. Your purpose is to teach people that. So that is your purpose. And whether that means people or in my case, you know, maybe my clients, but also my kid. So my purpose is teaching my kid all the things that I know and all the things that I'm good at, but not teaching her the stuff that I don't know about. So kind of, you know, playing both sides and learning every single day to get good at things and identify my weaknesses so that way eventually I can move them to the purpose section. But I think your purpose is just finding a passion of doing something, whatever that thing is, and then teaching someone how to do it or some people how to do it. But that is to me purpose, and I think I'm there, and I'm excited to see where it takes me.
Final question for you. If you could speak to your childhood self, what would you say?
Don't do it. That's all.
Okay.
Just fucking don't do it, man. Like whatever you're thinking, just knock it off. Don't do it.
All right. Sound advice. Tony Berardo, thank you so much. Really appreciate you for your time. And I know that we'll be talking soon and hopefully continue this relationship. Thank you so much.
Yes, man. No, please. Thank you for the time, buddy. Great job. Keep it up.
Thank you.